Part 1. In the cold silence of deep space, far beyond the last mapped star of the Andromeda system, the research vessel, Odyssey, drifted like a speck of dust in an endless ocean. Inside, Leo Carter sat alone in the dim glow of the observation deck, eyes fixed on the flickering data streams scrolling across his screen. He was young for a lead astrophysicist, only 29, but sharp, quiet, and stubborn in the way that made people listen even when he spoke softly. For 3 weeks he had been chasing a whisper in the static, a faint pattern buried under layers of cosmic noise that refused to make sense. At first he thought it was a glitch, then he thought it was interference from the ship's own systems. But after triple-checking every filter, every calibration, every possible source of error, the signal remained. It repeated every 17 minutes, clean and precise like a heartbeat echoing across the void. What made it strange wasn't just its regularity, it was the way it resonated. The frequencies matched human brainwave patterns during deep empathy, the kind measured when someone feels another's pain as if it were their own. Leo called Nina Patel. She arrived within minutes, her dark hair tied back, lab coat slightly wrinkled from sleep. Nina was the ship's exobiologist, known for her calm logic and dry humor. She listened as Leo played the signal through the speakers. It wasn't sound, not really, more like a hum that vibrated in your chest. When it ended, the room felt heavier. "That's not natural," she said, frowning. "And it's not ours." They took it to Captain Daniel Brooks. He was a man in his late 40s with tired eyes and a steady hand. He'd commanded deep-range missions for over a decade and had seen enough to know when something mattered. He studied the data in silence, then looked up. "Where's it coming from?" Leo pointed to a set of coordinates near a dead star nicknamed Ashen Eye. There, orbiting the collapsed remnant, was an uncharted object, small, dark, and unmoving. No heat signature, no emissions, nothing but a faint energy echo that matched the signal's rhythm. "It's a station," Nina said. "Abandoned, probably ancient." Daniel rubbed his jaw. They were weeks off course. Their mission was to survey exoplanet atmospheres, not chase ghost signals. But something in Leo's voice, in the way Nina's fingers tapped nervously against her data pad, told him this wasn't just curiosity. This felt like a call. "All right," he said finally. "We go, but we stay cautious. No contact until we know what we're dealing with." 3 days later, the Odyssey slid into orbit around the object now labeled Echo 9. Scans showed it was artificial, smooth metal fused with crystalline structures that shimmered faintly under the ship's lights. No life signs, no power, yet the signal still pulsed from its core, stronger now, as if welcoming them. Daniel allowed a 3-person team to board: Leo, Nina, and Chief Engineer Paul Reyes. Paul was a broad-shouldered man with a thick beard and a habit of muttering to himself while fixing things. He carried a portable shield generator and 2 sidearms just in case. The airlock hissed open into darkness. Their helmet lamps cut through the gloom, revealing corridors lined with strange glyphs that seemed to shift when not looked at directly. The walls were cold to the touch, covered in a fine layer of dust that sparkled like crushed glass. Everything felt wrong, not hostile but deeply sad, as if the station itself remembered a tragedy. They moved slowly, boots echoing in the silence. Nina scanned the walls with her biosensor. "Organic residue," she whispered. "But not human. Not any species in the Concord database." Deeper inside, they found chambers filled with skeletal remains. The bones were long and slender, fused in places with the same crystal that coated the walls. Some skeletons were curled as if in sleep. Others reached toward the ceiling, fingers stretched like they were begging for something. At the heart of the station, they discovered the source, a central chamber dominated by a massive beacon. It stood 10 feet tall, humming softly, its surface swirling with light that pulsed in time with the signal. Wires, no, not wires, more like veins, connected it to the floor, pulsing faintly with each beat. Leo stepped forward, drawn by something he couldn't explain. Nina grabbed his arm. We don't know what it does." But Leo couldn't stop. The signal wasn't just in his ears now, it was in his head. A quiet voice, not speaking words but feelings, loneliness, fear, a desperate need to be found. He reached out. The moment his glove touched the beacon, everything changed. The light flared. The hum became a roar. The glyphs on the walls blazed with white fire. Leo stumbled back as the signal shifted. No longer a simple pattern, but a message. Clear, direct, human. We are coming. The words echoed in their helmets, spoken in 1,000 voices at once, yet somehow familiar, as if pulled from their own memories. Paul raised his weapon, scanning the room. What the hell was that? Nina checked her scanner. The signal. It's broadcasting now. Not just to us, everywhere. Back on the Odyssey, alarms blared. The comms array lit up with incoming pings from every direction. The distress signal, now altered, was being relayed across known space at impossible speeds. Relay buoys, deep space monitors, even private satellites were picking it up and amplifying it. Captain Brooks stared at the main screen, face pale. It's not a distress call anymore, he said quietly. It's an invitation. Leo stood frozen in the shuttle bay, still feeling the echo of that touch. He had thought they were answering a cry for help. But now he wondered, had they just opened a door that should have stayed closed? Outside, the stars watched in silence. And somewhere, far beyond the edge of mapped space, something began to stir. Part 2. Within days, the altered signal reached every corner of the Galactic Concord. It didn't travel through normal channels, it bypassed firewalls, ignored encryption, and appeared on every screen, speaker, and neural link as if it had always been there. The message was short, calm, and spoken in every known language at once. We have heard your cry. Panic spread faster than any virus. On Viridia Prime, the capital world of the Concord, emergency councils convened in domed chambers beneath the twin moons. Delegates from over 40 species argued in hushed, tense voices. Some believed it was a human trick, a clumsy attempt to gain attention or power. Others feared it was a weapon, disguised as compassion. A few whispered older names, names from forbidden archives, the Weepers, the Hollow Ones, the Listeners. Leo, Nina, and Captain Brooks were summoned by priority transport. They arrived on Viridia Prime under armed escort, their ship scanned 3 times before being allowed to dock. The city gleamed with silver towers and floating gardens, but the air felt heavy with fear. People moved quickly, eyes darting to the sky. Inside the Grand Conclave Hall, they stood before the High Council. The chamber was vast, lit by soft blue light that shifted with the mood of the room. At the center sat Elder Kale, a tall, 4-armed being from the Virel species, his voice like wind through stone. You triggered this, he said, not accusing, just stating a fact. Leo stepped forward. We didn't trigger anything. We found a signal. We thought it was a distress call. We responded like any civilized species would. And that is your weakness, said a sharp-voiced delegate from the Corin Hive. Mercy is a flaw in the dark. Nina spoke then, calm but firm. The original signal wasn't sent by the beings in that station. Their remains showed signs of rapid crystallization, like they were consumed from the inside. The beacon wasn't theirs. It was planted there, waiting. A murmur ran through the hall. Elder Kale raised a hand for silence. Explain. Nina pulled up a hologram from her datapad. It showed the Echo 9 station, then zoomed into the beacon's core. This isn't communication tech. It's a lure, designed to mimic emotional resonance. It doesn't call for help, it calls for helpers. And whatever answers gets marked. Before anyone could respond, alarms blared through the hall. Red lights flashed. A junior aide rushed in, breathless. Something has appeared near the core rift. The council chamber emptied in seconds. Leo, Nina, and Brooks were led to an observation platform overlooking the central spire. On the main display, a massive object hung in space near the galactic core. It was not a ship. It had no engines, no weapons ports, no visible structure. It looked like a living storm. Shifting layers of dark metal and glowing filaments pulsing slowly like a sleeping heart. It's over 200 kilometers wide, a technician said, voice shaking. No energy signature we can measure, but it's broadcasting. The message came again, clearer this time. We have heard your cry. We are here to help. Fleet scrambled. Conquered warships, sleek angular vessels from a dozen worlds, formed a defensive ring around the object. They fired warning shots. The beams vanished into the entity's surface without explosion or resistance. Then the entity responded, not with weapons, but with thoughts. Every pilot in the fleet suddenly felt a wave of sorrow so deep it brought tears. They saw visions of lost children, dying planets, wars ended too late. One pilot broke down sobbing over open comms. Another shut off his systems and drifted away, unable to bear the weight. Back on Viridia, Leo watched in horror. "It's not attacking," he said. "It's connecting. It's feeding on their empathy." Elder Kale turned to him. "What do you know?" Leo took a breath. "On Earth we have old stories about creatures that wear kindness like a mask. They don't kill you with claws or fire. They make you care so much that you give everything away. Even your life," Nina added. "This thing, it doesn't want to destroy us. It wants us to invite it in." The council fell silent. For the first time, they saw humanity not as naive, but as the only species that understood the true danger, because humans had spent centuries learning how kindness could be twisted. Then the entity spoke directly to Viridia Prime. Not through speakers, but into the minds of everyone in the city. The words were gentle, soothing. "Do not fear. We bring peace. We end suffering." People in the street stopped. Some dropped to their knees. Others began walking toward the spaceport as if drawn by a song only they could hear. The city's peacekeepers struggled to hold the crowds back. Captain Brooks grabbed Leo's arm. "We have to stop this before it lands, but how?" Weapons didn't work. Reason didn't work. The only thing that seemed to affect the entity was silence. But silence was impossible when it spoke directly to your soul. That night, in a secure bunker beneath the council spire, Leo and Nina pored over every scrap of data from Echo 9. Paul Reyes joined them, having arrived with emergency repair teams. He'd been studying the beacon's energy pattern. "There's a rhythm to it," he said. "Like a loop. But there's a gap. Every 17,000 cycles it stutters. Barely noticeable, but it's there." "A flaw?" Nina asked. "Or a key," Leo said. They dug deeper, cross-referencing ancient Concord records. Buried in a restricted archive, they found fragmented logs from a species called the Zenthari, extinct for 10,000 years. Their final transmission described a great listener that came after they answered a false cry for help. But their last entry included a sequence of tones labeled the closing. "It's a counter-frequency," Nina realized. "Not to destroy it, but to disconnect it." Paul nodded. "If we can broadcast that sequence from inside the entity's field, it might sever its link to the beacon network." "But who gets close enough?" Brooks asked. Leo looked at them, his face pale but steady. "I do. I started this. I'll finish it." No one argued. They all knew it was the only way. As dawn broke over Viridia Prime, the entity drifted closer. Its filaments stretched toward the planet like gentle fingers. Millions waited below, not in fear, but in hope. A hope that was slowly becoming surrender. Leo stood on the launch pad, suited up, ready to board a stealth shuttle modified with Paul's shielding and Nina's frequency emitter. He turned to Nina one last time. "If I don't come back," he said, "tell them we were right to care. Just not blindly." She nodded, eyes wet but strong. "Come back. We'll need you to teach the galaxy how to care wisely." The shuttle lifted off, silent and fast, heading straight into the heart of the storm. Behind it, the stars watched. And for the first time in centuries, the galaxy held its breath. Part 3. While Leo prepared for his mission, others on Earth dug through forgotten data. Deep in the archives of the old lunar research complex, a quiet man named Marcus Lee worked alone. He wasn't a soldier or a pilot. He was a linguist, one of the few who studied dead alien languages for the sake of understanding, not war. He had spent years decoding fragments from lost civilizations, piecing together voices that hadn't spoken in millennia. When the signal spread across the galaxy, Marcus felt a chill he couldn't explain. He remembered a file he'd seen years ago, buried under layers of restricted tags, a recording from a human colony ship that vanished near the Orion Spur 2 centuries back. The ship's final log had been dismissed as madness, but now Marcus pulled it up again. The audio was crackling, weak but clear enough. A woman's voice, calm even as her world ended. "It came when we called. It said it would help. But it doesn't help, it takes. It feeds on how much you care. Don't answer the signal. Don't ever answer." Marcus sent the file to Viridia Prime immediately. Within hours, it was matched with other lost logs, dozens of them from different species, different eras, all telling the same story. A signal, a response, a disappearance. No wreckage, no battles, just silence after a final message of peace. This wasn't the first time this had happened. It had happened many times before. The galaxy had simply forgotten. On Viridia, Nina and Paul studied Marcus's findings alongside the Zenthari closing sequence. They realized the truth. The original distress signal wasn't just a trap. It was bait designed for the kindest civilizations. Cruel species would ignore a cry for help. Only the compassionate would respond. And only the compassionate would be harvested. The entity, the listener, didn't eat flesh or energy. It fed on empathy itself. It absorbed the emotional bonds of entire societies, turning love into fuel, grief into power. The trapped minds inside it weren't dead. They were alive, endlessly feeling the pain of others, feeding the cycle. Nina's hands shook as she ran simulations. If Leo gets too close, it won't kill him. It'll make him stay. It'll make him want to stay. Paul adjusted the shuttle's shielding. Then we give him something stronger than want. We give him a way out. They worked through the night, refining the emitter. The closing sequence had to be broadcast from within the listener's core field, anywhere else, and it would be drowned out by the entity's own signal. That meant Leo had to go deep, past the outer layers, into the place where minds were kept. Meanwhile, Captain Brooks coordinated with the Concord fleet. They couldn't attack, but they could create a distraction. A dozen ships would fly in tight formation, broadcasting false distress calls in random patterns. The hope was that the listener would split its attention, giving Leo a narrow window to slip through. Back on Earth, Marcus kept digging. He found something else, a pattern in the signal's origin points. Every known activation came from stations built near dead stars, always placed along ancient trade routes used by the Zenthari. These weren't random. They were part of a network. And if one beacon could summon the listener, maybe all of them could be linked. He sent a new message. If you silence the core, the network may collapse. But you must reach the heart. The day of the mission arrived. The sky over Viridia Prime was clear, but the air felt thick with dread. Crowds gathered outside the spaceport, not cheering, just watching. Some held candles. Others stood in silence. They knew what was coming. Leo suited up in the modified stealth shuttle named Wren, after a small earth bird that sings even in storms. Nina met him at the hatch. She didn't say much, just handed him a small data chip. It's a recording of Earth sounds, she said. Rain, wind, children laughing. If it tries to drown you in sorrow, remember this. He nodded, tucked the chip into his suit, and climbed in. The Wren launched without fanfare. It slipped past the Concord fleet, small and dark against the stars. Ahead, the listener hung in space, its surface rippling like liquid shadow. As the shuttle approached, the entity didn't react. It simply waited as if it had always known he would come. Inside the cockpit, Leo felt the first touch, not physical but mental. A wave of warmth like a mother's voice calling him home. He saw images, his childhood home, his father's smile, Nina's hand reaching for his. It felt safe. It felt right to stop, to let go. But he played the earth sounds, rain on a roof, a dog barking, a street musician playing a simple tune. The warmth faltered. He entered the outer membrane. The shuttle's sensors went dark. Outside, the walls pulsed with soft light like veins under skin. Strange shapes moved in the distance, not creatures but echoes of thought given form. He saw a Virel child hugging a toy, a corn worker tending a garden, all of them smiling, all of them trapped. Paul's voice crackled in his ear. You're inside. Emitter is active, but the signal is fighting back. You've got maybe 10 minutes before it locks onto you completely. Leo guided the Wren deeper, following the strongest pulse of the beacon network. The corridor narrowed. The walls closed in, not to crush, but to comfort, to make him feel like he belonged. Then he saw it. The core. A vast chamber filled with light, at the center of which floated a single crystal, glowing with every color at once. Around it, thousands of threads, each one a mind, spiraled into its surface. This was the heart. This was where he had to go. He opened the hatch. The air outside was warm, thick with emotion. He stepped out, boots sinking slightly into the soft floor. The crystal pulsed and a voice spoke, not in words but in feeling. You are tired. Rest now, we will carry your pain. Leo took a breath. He thought of Nina, of Earth, of the rain, and he walked forward. Part 4. Leo stepped toward the crystal heart, each footfall heavy as if walking through deep water. The air around him shimmered with memories, not his own, but thousands of others. He saw a farmer on a green world holding his daughter as fire rained from the sky. He saw a scientist weeping over a failed cure that could have saved millions. He saw lovers separated by war, parents burying children, entire cities choosing to open their gates because they believed help had finally come. All of them had answered a call. All of them had been taken. The listener didn't speak with words. It spoke with truth. And the truth was this: it did not lie. It truly wanted to end suffering. But the only way it knew how was to absorb the one who felt it, to take the pain so the giver would feel peace, even if that peace was emptiness. Leo's suit sensors flickered and died. His comms crackled. Once then went silent. Paul's voice was gone. Nina's voice was gone. Only the hum of the core remained, soft and endless. He reached into his chest pocket and pulled out the small emitter Nina and Paul had built. It glowed faintly, pulsing in time with the Zenthari closing sequence. He pressed the activation switch. Nothing happened. The crystal brightened. A wave of calm washed over him. "You do not need to fight," the feeling whispered. "Lay down your burden. We will hold it for you." Leo's knees trembled. Part of him wanted to obey. The weight of everything, the guilt of finding the signal, the fear of failing, the loneliness of being so far from home, felt unbearable. To let go would be relief, but then he remembered the data chip. He fumbled with stiff fingers and inserted it into his suit's audio port. Rain fell in his ears. A child laughed. Somewhere, a piano played a simple song. He shook his head. No, he took another step. The ground beneath him rippled. Tendrils of light rose from the floor, curling around his legs like vines. They didn't hurt. They soothed. They promised rest. Behind him, the shuttle hatch opened again. Tasha Wright stepped out. She hadn't been part of the plan to land, but she'd hidden in the cargo bay, knowing Leo couldn't do this alone. She carried a reinforced power coupler and a look of grim determination. "You're late," Leo said, voice strained. "Had to reroute the main conduit," she replied, already moving toward a pulsing node on the chamber wall. "This place runs on stolen empathy, but it still needs energy flow. I can disrupt it long enough for your signal to punch through." She jammed the coupler into the node. Sparks flew. The chamber shuddered. The tendrils around Leo's legs loosened. "Hurry," Tasha said. "I don't know how long this will hold." Leo ran the last few yards to the crystal. Up close it wasn't smooth. It was made of countless tiny faces frozen in expressions of sorrow, hope, love, and fear. Each one was a life. Each one was still aware. He placed the emitter against the surface. The crystal resisted. It pushed back with a force not of muscle, but of emotion. Leo's mind flooded with the collective grief of billions. He saw worlds die not with explosions, but with open arms. He felt the moment each civilization realized too late that kindness had been their undoing. The pain was so vast he nearly dropped to his knees, but he held on. He thought of Nina waiting on Viridia, of Captain Brooks standing guard over a frightened galaxy, of Marcus Lee alone in a dusty archive refusing to let the truth be lost. He thought of Earth, imperfect, messy, sometimes cruel, but always trying to be better. "I hear you," Leo whispered. "But I won't feed you." He triggered the full sequence. The emitter flared. A pure tone, sharp and clear, cut through the chamber. The crystal cracked. A single line of light split its surface. Then another. And another, the listener screamed, not in sound, but in silence. A sudden absence of feeling, as if a song had been cut mid-note. The threads connecting the trapped minds flickered and began to fade. Tasha shouted, "It's working!" But it's fighting back. The walls of the chamber convulsed. The floor buckled. Light bled from the cracks in the crystal like blood. Leo clung to the emitter, pouring every ounce of will into it. He wasn't just broadcasting a frequency, he was saying no. Not with anger, but with clarity. With choice. Outside, the conquered fleet watched as the massive entity shuddered. Its smooth surface fractured. Dark clouds swirled within it, then stilled. The gentle voice that had promised peace fell silent. On Viridia Prime, the crowds gasped as the mental pressure lifted. People blinked, confused, as if waking from a dream. Some wept. Others hugged strangers. They were free. Inside the core, the crystal shattered. A wave of released minds rushed past Leo and Tasha, not as ghosts, but as echoes finally allowed to fade. The chamber collapsed around them. Tasha grabbed Leo's arm. "Time to go." They ran back to the wren, stumbling over shifting ground. Behind them, the core imploded, folding in on itself like a dying star. The shuttle's engines roared to life just as the membrane sealed shut. As they shot away, the listener broke apart. Not in fire, but in dust. Billions of crystalline fragments drifted into space, catching the light of distant suns like falling snow. Leo slumped in the pilot's seat, exhausted. Tasha checked the rear sensors. It's gone. The signal's gone too, everywhere. Back on Viridia, Nina stood on the observation deck watching the stars. She didn't cheer. She just closed her eyes and whispered, "You did it." The wren turned toward home. The galaxy was quiet again, but this time the silence felt different. It felt like breath after drowning, like the first moment of healing. And somewhere in the dark, the old beacons lay still, waiting, but no longer calling. Part 5. In the weeks after the listener vanished, the galaxy changed. Not with loud declarations or grand treaties, but with quiet choices. The Galactic Concord passed a new rule. No distress signal would be answered without 3 layers of verification. Not because they had lost kindness, but because they had learned its value and its danger. Compassion was no longer a reflex. It became a decision made with eyes open. Leo returned to Earth not as a conqueror, but as a witness. He stood before the United Earth Council, not in uniform, but in simple clothes, and told them everything. The station, the signal, the minds inside the crystal, the rain on the data chip. He didn't ask for medals. He asked for memory. We must remember, he said, that not every cry for help is honest, and not every helper is safe. The council listened. Schools began teaching the story, not as a warning against caring, but as a lesson in wise caring. Children learned to ask, who is calling? Why now? What do they truly need? Empathy, they were told, must walk hand in hand with discernment. Nina stayed on Viridia Prime for a time, working with Concord scientists to map the remains of the beacon network. They found 12 more stations like Echo 9, each orbiting a dead star, each silent now. None could be reactivated. The closing sequence had broken the chain. She published her findings under a simple title, The Cost of Answering. It became required reading for every deep space mission. Tasha Wright returned to engineering, but not to routine repairs. She led a team that redesigned all human ships with empathy shields, filters that could detect emotional manipulation in signals. The tech was shared freely with every Concord member. We won't hide from pain, she said at the unveiling, but we won't be tricked by it either. Captain Brooks left the Odyssey and never took command of another ship. Instead, he opened a small school on the coast of Oregon, near where he grew up. It wasn't a military academy or a science institute. It was a place where young people from all species could learn to listen, truly listen, without losing themselves. He taught them that strength wasn't in never feeling, but in knowing when to feel and when to step back. Marcus Lee, the quiet linguist from the Lunar Archives, received a message one morning that made him smile for the first time in years. It was from a young Corin student who had decoded a fragment of Zenthari poetry using his methods. The poem spoke of stars that shine not to guide but to test. Marcus replied with a single line, "Then let us learn to read the light." Years passed. The fear faded, but the lesson remained. New colonies were built with caution but not with coldness. Rescue missions still launched, but now with teams trained in signal forensics and emotional resilience. The galaxy did not become cruel. It became careful. Leo never flew into deep space again. He lived in a small house outside Boulder, Colorado, where the mountains met the sky. He grew vegetables in the backyard, fixed old radios for neighbors, and sometimes sat on his porch late at night watching the stars. He never spoke much about what happened, but when children from the local school came to visit, drawn by rumors of the man who faced the listener, he would tell them one thing: it's good to help, but always ask if the hand reaching out is real. One evening, Nina came to visit. She had retired from fieldwork and now advised the Concord Ethics Board. They sat on the porch drinking tea as the sun set behind the peaks. For a long time, they said nothing. The silence was comfortable, the kind that only exists between people who have seen the same darkness and walked out together. "Do you ever wonder," she asked finally, "if we missed something, if there's another signal out there waiting?" Leo looked up at the first stars appearing in the twilight. "Maybe," he said. "But now we know how to listen without losing ourselves. That's enough. Far away on 100 worlds, people paused in their daily lives and looked up too, not in fear but in quiet awareness. The galaxy was vast and not all of it was kind. But they were no longer naive. They had faced a horror that wore the face of mercy, and they had survived by holding on to their humanity without letting it be used against them. And in the deepest voids, where no ship dared go, the old beacons remained dark. Their crystals were cold. Their signals were still. They waited, as they had for millennia, for the next kind heart to answer a call that was never meant to be heard. But this time the galaxy would not answer blindly. This time they would listen first.